Hey, everybody, this is Amelia Tracy here. Coming online for a very brief presentation about some key ways to think about how to make your decarbonization team stronger for the women on your team. So how to make a team dynamic or be a leader that supports the women on your team. So let's just dive in. So let's see if I can here we go. Okay. So who am I? I have been working in the sustainability and decarbonization space for about 15 years. I graduated from undergrad in 2008 and quickly thereafter moved to Boston and started working for a little company in a town outside of the city called Newton, doing energy audits, energy efficiency audits using the BPI building performance standard auditing metrics. And so through that process, I really got a good handle on understanding the energy infrastructure of not only residential, but also commercial and industrial buildings, and how to make those buildings more energy efficient through a number of different practices and processes, starting with insulation and sort of tweaking the efficiency of the existing mechanical heating and cooling systems so that that would be more efficient before totally converting it to something that would be maybe more of an electrified heat pump or some other type of units. So that's sort of where I got my start. After that, I moved to a company that was very influential in Boston and still is. In this company was in full-on startup mode in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where we were commercializing new market technologies for manufacturers from Israel and other parts of the globe who didn't yet have a North American or Eastern Seaboard market presence for cogeneration, solar hot water, solar PV. Lots of different manufacturers at that time because of the era investment in clean energy. We're looking to get into the market, particularly in New England. And on this team at this company was ready to sort of be the manufacturer's rep in that way. And so we took a lot of losses, but we took enough big wins that it balanced out. And we actually also were influential in creating a public-private partnership with the state of Massachusetts to commercialize a third-party financed program for commercial and industrial scale solar hot water for like academic institutions who, despite having proximity to natural gas lines, which would reduce their greenhouse gas emissions as well as their cost of heating, they couldn't get there because of the entanglement of infrastructure underground around Boston. So developing a sort of an innovative financial model for commercial solar hot water systems on academic institutions in particular was another really interesting thing that we did back then. From there, I moved to just a small team who was tiny but mighty and developing commercial scale solar commercial scale solar PV, both on rooftops and ground mounted, typically scale of 1 to 5 megawatt systems, landfills, greenfields. We specialized in developing solar farms in municipal utilities, which is really interesting. It was a very different process than working with some of the investor-owned utilities, both in terms of length of development cycle, as well as just the type of things that the municipal utilities were interested in. And then from there, I went into work around regenerative land management and worked on a project that was simultaneously a historic renovation and a mixed-use development that deployed regenerative agriculture into the land management practices as a way to think about sort of holistically how to, re-engage people in food production, in a way that the food production was also sequestering carbon. And then since 2020, I have been leading some work to scale up and refine our processes in a company that is building the highest quality decarbonized residential buildings in New England. And so that's my background, just basically like everything to do with energy efficiency, renewables, new market technologies, public-private partnerships, permitting, development, different facets of carbon sequestration and, land management and different industries too, right? Like residential construction, renewable energy at the scale that we were operating on really plays more into commercial real estate development. But so like lots of different industries, a lot of thought into how our utilities sectors and our real estate sectors and the parties involved in making decisions like this think and operate. Why are we having this conversation today? We're having this conversation today because if we don't do anything about the gender pay gap in this country, it would be 208 years before women were on par with men in what they made. And that's, when we say women, I think we're talking about white women here. So that's like a best case scenario. And that's not acceptable, right? Like that's just not an acceptable outcome. So we need to spend time thinking about what we can do. And my perspective is there are best practices in every industry about every single thing. Like positive deviance is a real thing. Like go find the person that's doing the thing that's working really well for them and imitate them and model them and see if it works for you. That's one strategy, and that's a really good strategy. So please do that if you're so inclined. Another strategy that is complementary to that strategy is to say, what do I think needs to happen? And based on the people and the context and the community that we're in, what are the resources that are unique to me? What's the history of the place and the history of the relationships that are coming into play here? And how can I honor the context that I'm operating in to build more equitable outcomes for women in particular in this conversation? And when I say women, I'm talking about all kinds of women, right? Like all women. And the offshoot of that situation is that you're also going to get a lot of benefits for a lot of other people who may be marginalized in other ways. And when we do this, when we create a little bit more awareness about the barriers and the obstacles to people's parity in the system, which is really where the conversation around merit comes in, we remove the obstacles for their participation, for their willingness and ability to offer solutions to the challenges on the table that the group has identified it needs to solve. And when we're able to acknowledge that people are offering solutions that are viable, we all of a sudden create a dynamic where like the resources available to us become exponentially greater, because the resources are the thoughts, the ideas, the opportunities that we can see to solve our problems. And so I'm here to say, like, if we're working in decarbonization, we know that we have a lot of the technical solutions already, even if we feel unsatisfied by their supply chains and right, like all of the finance around it, and right, like even though there are problems with the existing technology that we know if we just deployed at a larger scale, we could probably solve the problem with. And I think it's a much more interesting path to go, where we say, let's be ruthless at setting the table so that everybody's contributions can be heard and appreciated, so that we're building a merit-based workplace. And from there, let's see if we can cook up something way better than what we see available right now. Like what we see available right now in terms of technology and the availability of solutioning right now should be the baseline of what we do. And then when we shift our mindset to say, okay, so like if the baseline of what's available right now is that we actually do solve climate change, we do mitigate it enough so that the most marginalized people on the planet are taken care of in their place. Like, what a concept, like that's the baseline. And then the upshot from that is to say, if we use this system that Amelia is talking about, that says that baseline is cool, and we should definitely go for that. And what if there's some kind of an upside that says, by creating a merit-based culture in the companies that are deploying this technology, we can create something way more sophisticated than that, that honors the sophistication of life on Earth. And through that process, like, it's like that thing where it's like you can't really see what's coming until you walk down the road a little bit more. And once we develop the systems so that more people can engage, and we do that by working on gender equity and pay transparency and all these things in the workplace. Once we open the possibilities beyond just surviving, like the challenge then for us is to get good at receiving the love that can come from there. Like, it sounds so crazy to say, but like, I think part of the biggest part of the problem that we have right now is that people don't believe there's actually a solution. And so we need to believe that there's a solution, and we also need to believe that that solution is so damn good, that we can do nothing but relax into that. And then when we relax into that, we can just get on with making it. We can just get on with going in that direction. And for me, from where I stand, after 15 years of doing this work, we don't have a good enough vision that allows me to relax into where we're going. And so I'm stepping up to say, let's just do it. Let's just build the vision that relaxes us into the vision of the future that we're building, so that we can just build it. And it doesn't have to be this big thing, because it is a big thing. And the thing about big things is that to solve a crisis, you have to calm down. You have to slow down. You have to be incredibly intentional about what you're doing. And that's what's required in this moment, is to stop and to slow down and to start being incredibly intentional about what we're doing. And that's hard when there are forces out there that are saying everything's only speeding up. So you do have to remove yourself from the speeding up people, or at least enough. You can remove yourself enough from that to say, oh, actually, getting clear about where I'm going and where I want to go and who's also on board with that. That's way more important than speeding up right now, right? Because particularly if the people who are speeding up don't have a vision of the world that you want to live into, don't give them your energy. Don't give it. So, okay, let's get a little bit deeper into this. Promise you it's not going to take that long. So whenever we're talking about, leadership work or equity-based work, we always want to start with a capacity assessment. We always want to start with like where are we right now? Because it will help inform the steps that we take to go forward. So a couple things around making a workplace better for women that I've experienced have to do with two things. One is how decisions about pay are made in the workplace, and the other one is how decisions about power and decision-making work in the workplace. And so compensation philosophies are usually something that larger companies actually have written down that say that, these are our philosophies and values around how we make decisions around compensation. Most smaller companies don't have a written compensation policy. And honestly, most of them haven't even thought about what their compensation philosophy is. So if you find yourself at a smaller company, or a company that's moving fast and breaking things, or any of these types of decarbonization teams that are just working on a mission, like, don't be surprised if there's no compensation philosophy. And also don't let that be a roadblock for you. So if you're the leader, you don't need to draw one up. First point here is, what level of commitment your leadership will be accountable to vis-a-vis equitable promotions, hiring, and incentive structures. So obviously we have like government regulations that say that you can't make biased decisions. And that's really important to know. HR policies are very important to have and to understand. The reality is that smaller companies that are startups or that are working hard on important things, don't have the bureaucracy in place to actually deliver equitable outcomes in their people management. And, I'm actually like not a fan of bureaucracy in a startup because those two things don't work. So really the conversation then just becomes around what is the leadership's commitment to that? And at a very minimum, the leadership can say, we have a desire to build a company that has, pay transparency or is equitable in its promotion, hiring, and incentive structures. That's a good place to start. A lot of people don't even have that. So some conversation around what the leadership's philosophy around compensation is a good place to start. And then if you're the leader and you expect your staff to like negotiate with you on their promotions, on their wages, on how much visibility they get, just say that. Just let them know that that's what you expect. Because for women, first of all, women who are expected to negotiate in the workplace, the style of negotiation that women are more successful using is very different than the style that men are taught to use. For women, to be successful negotiating in the workplace, the style has to be more something like, if you give this extra project or this promotion or whatever to me, it's going to benefit all these people. It's going to benefit your business. It's going to benefit more than me. Like that. That is the data about how best to negotiate as a woman, is to say, like, you're not just giving it to me, you're giving it to a bunch of people, which I think is a super problematic strategy. But if we're trying to win, that's what we do as women. And it's important that you as the leader understand that, because women are not taught to negotiate. And even when they are, they're taught to negotiate in a way that helps them win, but is bonkers in its strategy. Whereas men, typically, they just ask for what they need. And you might come up with some compelling reasons why, but it's not typically about anybody else. And so if you're the leader of a company and you don't have a compensation philosophy or a clear commitment to some equitable hiring, promotion, incentive practices, just make it clear that you expect people to negotiate so that they can develop those skills. That actually could be a real benefit for your team to develop those negotiation skills. I also really love the idea of if you're gonna say, I'm not gonna spend the time on my side to develop the systems for equity in this place, and it's gonna be more of a negotiation-based promotion house. Give negotiation training to your staff and give the negotiation that's given to women to your staff, so that there's a little bit of equity in terms of how people understand what you're looking for from a promotion standpoint. And then keep that in mind when people are pitching to you about why they should be given more money. Are they talking to me about how this is going to improve the lives of more than just themselves, particularly if they're a man, right? Like, are they using the female success strategy for negotiation in this negotiation? Like, that's one simple shift that you can make. And then, the other piece about compensation philosophy is, if you do want to develop pay transparency, all you need to do is let your team know you don't have the bandwidth to do this yet, but it's something that you would like to do. And the reason why you should do that is because if there is somebody with the interest and the talent and the skills to deliver that on staff for you, you've now created a reason to promote someone. You've created a reason to give somebody some new responsibility and to have more equity in their outcomes, right? Like particularly if it's a woman on staff. So by sharing with your team the intentions or the desires that you have about the level of leadership that you're bringing, you're creating opportunities for people to be entrepreneurial and to come to you and say, I would like to take that project on. Can I be responsible for that? And you can make a decision about what you feel about that. But sharing with people opportunities is super critical, particularly when it comes to any equity-based work, people management work. Like, share with people what you do and don't have the bandwidth to do, so that the people who can support you can come forward. Power and governance. How do you make decisions at your company? In my opinion, and this is similar to the compensation philosophy, transparency is way more important than perfectly democratic structures. So if you've got a good old boys club who likes to go golfing or skiing or do something like that to rest and relax and talk about business and make deals with bankers, okay, like, I'm not sitting here judging anybody for how they do things. I'm just saying it's only problematic if you expect that the people who are not included in those like recreational activities because they were not invited, they don't have an interest in that stuff, like whatever reasons, if they know what's going on, so that you're just reducing friction. You're just saying like, yeah, I know this is maybe problematic for the people who've got kids who can't participate in this or whatever, but it's what we do. And maybe we'd like to shift it at some point, but it's just what we do. Like, that's a stronger place to be than to pretend like your back office deals are just, totally okay at this point in time. Like, it's problematic to make decisions in a back chamber, and businesses have to do that all the time because of the pace of business. And so as long as you can be transparent about the reality of the situation so that people know what to work with, that's like most of the game. The other piece of this that you can do as a boss, as a leader of a team, to help your female employees, your women employees, find some parity, find equity in their work, is give them advice for how to navigate the system and get their ideas heard and adopted, right? So like, if you're going to the cigar lounge and like cutting deals with the bankers and like a couple of your dudes who work with you, like, go out of your way to talk to the people who should be in those places but wouldn't otherwise be there, to say, we're doing this, maybe next time we can do something different. Or what would you like to see if you were to participate in those types of conversations? Like, how would you see that working out if we open the doors and ask you to participate? Like, what context should we create so that you felt good? Like, maybe it's still recreational, maybe it's, off the clock. I don't care. Just having that conversation is the most important part, to acknowledge that there is a power differential between the people who are making decisions regardless of where and when they're making them. And that if you don't happen to be at the right place and time, it makes a big difference. And so just knowing that as a leader and choosing to acknowledge it, choosing to say the elephant in the room, choosing to do that work all over and over and over and over again is what's going to cause your team to be more successful, particularly for the women on the team. And then the last piece is what commitments can you make to the women on your team to help them be heard? What commitments can you ask them to help you make, like, so that you can become a better leader, particularly when issues arise that create obstacles to their participation. So you can also go out of your way to say, listen, like, we went to the cigar bar yesterday and we cut a deal and it's so exciting, right? And I know that that means that you weren't able to be there. It can't be your deal now, whatever. I'm going to make a commitment to you that the next time one of these opportunities comes around, we're going to make it intentionally possible for you to be there, because we recognize that if we keep going down this road, you just will never be a part of it. And that's going to have impacts on your career. Vision. Vision is extra critical. So we start with capacity, which is where we are. You know, I'm 5'9", I'm 130, I'm super pale, like whatever. What is it that we're working with right now? And vision is, where do we want to be, right? Where do we want to be? So vision of the leadership, getting clear on who is a part of that vision. What is the main priority of the vision? Oftentimes this is the priority of the business. Why are you creating this vision? What is the motivation? It's if you can ask this question to yourself at least 7 times, but probably more like 50 times. Why are you creating this vision? Why are you creating this vision? Just keep asking, keep giving yourself answers. At some point, you're going to get to some emotions. You're going to get to some like fundamental motivator for yourself about why you're creating this vision. And that is very important for you to be clear about. What timeline or schedule are you working on this vision? So how long does this vision take for you? Or like, can you make a decision about that, even if you don't necessarily have super clarity? And where does this vision take place? So just getting a little bit more clear about the motivations and the vision that you're working towards is really good to do, particularly if you want to make your team more equitable for the women who work there. Because when the leader doesn't have a clear vision, the leader then is making a lot of assumptions about what's acceptable for everybody on the team. And that's often not like, that's where the problem happens, where it's to say like, we can't just blindly follow leaders anymore who are not willing to say, I understand that these are my strengths and weaknesses. These are my blind spots. And also this is where we're going. This is where I'm taking us. Like smart people are not following leaders who are unable to talk about where they're going and also acknowledge what work they need to do to get there. So having a vision as a leader is non-negotiable, high priority. And then vision of the female employee or employees, plural. I'm the one who's like the only woman on the team. So if that's you, I feel you. How does her vision fit into the leader's vision? That's what you need to know. You need to know how your vision as a leader is holding the vision of the other people on the team. And in particular, your job is to understand what the vision of the women or any of the marginalized people on the team is, because that's going to help your vision get stronger. And it's going to make sure that you're thinking about them when you're making decisions about what to do in the business. So how does the vision of your female employees for their lives, their personal visions and their professional visions, but it's holistic, fit into the leader's vision? And then the question as a leader is, what aspects of her vision feel tangential, unnecessary, superfluous? Why? Okay, this is the work. This is the work. This is the work that says, why do I think that, I don't like the only thing that comes to mind right now, which is so funny, is why do I think that, watching the Barbie movie and talking about its implications on society together is a stupid idea as a leader. Why do I think that? Why do I think that, this is a real world example. Why do I think that part of the winning bid that we submit for a major potential client is it's too much for us to say, we will make internships for the people who live in low-income housing if we win this bid to provide energy, remote energy, PPA energy, to this low-income housing authority. Why is it so much of a stretch? And it was at the time to say, yeah, we will make a career pathway for high schooler or, teenage and young adult people who are interested in getting into renewable energy as a part of our winning bid, right? Like, what aspects of her vision feel tangential, unnecessary, superfluous, and why? Because your interrogation of your own judgments of her contributions and her, like, the beautiful fractal pieces of her vision, will tell you where the edges of the opportunity are that you see for your business. And the more you can widen that as a practice, the more you're going to be able to see the connections between how everything works, and you're going to be able to solve problems faster, and money loves speed. So as a business owner, like, your job is to get out of the way for your team and also remove the obstacles of your team. And so your judgments are the things that get in the way, right? So this practice of thinking about why you have judgments is, some of them can be valid, and it's always totally valid to say, I don't see the connection. Can you help me? Or, not right now. That can't be what we do right now. It's always totally okay to make the call. It's just not okay to live an unexamined life, right? Like, it's not okay to say, I am simultaneously building the energy infrastructure for the decarbonization agenda, and I'm not really feeling like I have the energy to think about how to make that work for everybody. Like, that's where it's not okay. How can you build a habit to view the needs of the women on your team as central to the success of your team? So I say, how can you build a habit to do this? Because similar to the piece above, oftentimes when you're not in a majority in any kind of a system and organization, you're working to assimilate into that system so that you can survive and operate and not be too difficult and slow everybody down. Like, that's just a normal part of it. And oftentimes when, for women, I'll just speak for myself as a woman, that just means that you work really hard to pretend like the things that you need, you don't need. And like in 2024, we're really rocking that boat and seeing what parts of it we can shake free of. Our decarbonization teams are not ahead of the curve in this way, though. And I think about how in the next 7 years, there's just a lot of work to do. There's just a shit ton of work to do. And how we're going to manage this. Like, I don't yet have a clear vision on how we're going to do all the work we need to do, basically at the end of the world, to make sure it's not the end of the world and still survive, like the crushing stress of it. Like, how do we do it all? And I think a lot about how, like, the bad corporate culture, encourages women to freeze their eggs so that they can work harder during their reproductive years. And how some of that's going to be inevitable, that people want to put off being their full selves for the sake of, like, climate solutions. And to some degree, we should support that. But I can't tell you how many times I've been to circles of women and circles of people in this movement who said, I'm not having children because the world's going to shit, or just made other major decisions because they were not supported. And I don't believe that's the way forward. I don't believe like sacrificing your humanity for humanity is the way forward. I just don't, I appreciate the intellectual thought and the reality of that we all only have limited energy to spend. And, you know, the fact that the particular woman who I know who made that choice because she didn't want to be the kind of mother that wasn't all in, because she also was very committed to her climate work. And I super appreciate the complexity of this situation, but I don't want anybody to make that choice, not for those reasons. And that's why it's important that as a leader of a decarbonization team, you appreciate that those choices are being made, so that in the ways that you can, you stop people from having to make those choices. You make it possible for them to be themselves and be their full selves on your team, so that they can give you the best that they have. So then the next question is, what do the women's needs on your team look like? What age are they? What do they care about? Like, just getting a little bit granular about that and building a practice around it. This is really going to support you. Removing roadblocks for women. I think the biggest thing that I've found to be successful in helping decarbonization leaders be better leaders, particularly for the women on their teams, is thinking cyclically. You know, women are cyclical creatures. I believe men are too, but because of menstruation, women are cyclical creatures. We tie into the cycles of other women. We tie into the cycles in nature, the moon cycles, tide cycles. Like, there's just so many cycles in the natural world that women are connected to, because we are connected to our own cycles. And this is part of the major rub with having a 9-to-5, 50 week a year job, or as a woman, is that schedule is not in alignment with the ways that women are cyclical, and seasons are cyclical, and biological systems are cyclical. And so, you know, in various different roles, I have worked on implementing support systems for women on teams to honor the cyclical nature of a woman's life at different stages. So that has looked like menstrual and menopausal policies. Certainly paid family leave is mandatory, if not inevitable, for hopefully everyone in this call. Getting really serious about that, I think, is something that businesses in the decarbonization space need to be doing. 16 weeks is the amount of time that you should be planning for and budgeting for the birthing parent in particular, but, you know, 12 weeks for the non-birthing, like, these are big chunks of time, and you need to plan for that. Childcare and flexible work, these are also incredibly important pieces to consider, so that you can have women on your team who are engaged in helping your business grow, right? Like, I'm not saying like just spend all the money on these policies. I am saying though that, like, if you're not having a conversation with your people about what they need and what options are, and like how they're navigating the complexity of all this stuff, then you're missing the opportunity to find the simple ways, the simple, inexpensive ways to support the people on your team. And of course, paid family leave, childcare, flexible work, these are not, you know, issues exclusive to women, but particularly if you are a birthing parent, they are important for women. And that's why we're bringing them up. Next, I'm just going to say, like, you know, because you know, some companies really work on a quarterly or a, you know, a bifurcated annual cycle. I'd say though that like designing business cycles like seasons, designing the way that your business works so that certain things are more pronounced during the year than others will be very supportive for women. You know, having little chunks of time where things happen and then rest. I believe this would support everybody, but that type of thing is very supportive for women. Also gestation times. So reminding ourselves that from the inception of something to the time that you know, you can harvest whatever you created. It's important to understand that there is a gestation time, and that also the length of time of that gestation time is directly related to what you're trying to create and what you're starting with and what the resources are that you have. And so this can be one way for you to start to consider like real delivery deadlines for different types of projects, right? And I want to say like slow down to speed up. The engagement on your teams around like particularly special projects or things that require a different kind of thinking. And so just really like deadlines are good, giving yourself deadlines, but giving yourself deadlines that appreciate that things need to naturally mature. So it's, you know, so typically that means maybe not necessarily even like I like a 90-day cycle, but not everything will fit into a 90-day cycle. And getting intimate with the gestation time for different types of goals on your team will be supportive. And then the last piece around living cyclically is allowing subtractive processes to occur regularly, planning obsolescence, developing a culture and appreciation for the cyclical destruction and transformation that creates possibilities for new opportunities. So this is like deeply feminine, right? Which is to say, if we're not letting things go so that we can also transform into something else, if we're not continually doing that on a cyclical basis, things are going to get stale and really hard. And this is part of what women experience in our menses, is total transformation, and like to different degrees, but you know, and then I'm a woman, so I only have this perspective, but like then over every certain number of years, we all experience different kinds of transformations, right? So like the cyclicalness of transformation is very important to acknowledge as a business leader, particularly if you're looking for deep engagement by many types of people on your team. And so allowing yourself to, as a leader, to step back and say, okay, what's not working? Like what's not happening? What's not conducive to what is working, you know? And how can we let that go? And trust that by letting that go, we can compost the energy that we spent on it so that that becomes part of the transformation of what becomes available. Like it's like cleaning house. Like how can we let stuff go? How can we get stuff off of our plates on a regular cyclical basis, making a habit of doing this so that you can make transformation? You know, I think a lot of us, I'm 38, like we didn't really learn digital hygiene, like all these files, all these systems, like how do we clean things up? How do we decompose so that we create space for clarity and for focus and for action on new ideas that are more relevant because they were generated from something that's more relevant going on right now than just old ideas we've been sacking along for as long as we can because we're hoarders. and we invested in them and we don't want to let them go. Like decomposition and transformation is a very important piece of a woman's experience, and bringing that piece into the business cycle can be incredibly effective. There's a book called Subtract that Letty Klotz wrote down at University of Virginia. I highly recommend it for understanding that subtractive processes are incredibly powerful. Most of us go to additive. We just add. But after you add, if you can also subtract, then you get sophisticated refinement. And that's what we all want. And then this is the last one, which is your women on your team are not just women. They're also other intersectional identities and realities. And these are all assets. The ways that we are intersectional means that that's the ways that every person is in, I'm just trying to generalize so that you can engage, all it is, this is how you can think of it, is the contours of the piece in the jigsaw puzzle that we are. That's what our intersectionality is. It's just like a custom and unique contour around us that nobody else has, that we get to bring to a situation and add our perspective that's completely unique. And so in terms of being a leader on a decarbonization team and making your team better for the women on your team, it's helpful for you to remember that you're not just talking about women. You know, we're not just talking about feminism. We're not just talking about like women's rights. We're not just talking about one single issue. We're talking about the fact that women are always intersectional, as are everybody else. And what matters to women is intersectional. So the things that we've already covered today are only one tiny slice of what the women on your team want and need from you, and want and need from their work, and want and need from the vision that they're helping you create. And there's nothing to be afraid of about that, other than the only thing you should be afraid of is if you're so afraid that you're unwilling to have conversations to learn about your people so that you understand their intersections. Because what I can tell you is that the businesses that succeed in the future will be the businesses who can look around and say, okay, who on this team can understand this problem better than anybody else, and why? And even better than that, we don't even have to have a conversation about it, because we know each other so freaking well that we appreciate that this person's lived experience in whatever ways makes them uniquely positioned to lead in this way. And we deploy them. Like that's how the future goes for successful businesses, particularly in decarbonization. And so appreciating that equity work to build equity on your team, particularly for women and for everybody, right? Like anybody and everybody, people who are marginalized in particular, which is why equity work exists. It's not about checking the box. Like I've been the one woman on the team, right? Like who goes to the sales meetings, who represents women. That's not going to be that's not an asset to operate that way, right? Because it's superficial. And it means that you don't really understand what the reason why that checkbox got designed in the first place. Instead of that, as a leader, you bring who's relevant with you to those sales calls. You bring who's relevant with you to those trade shows. You bring the people who have the life experience and the skills and the interest and the motivation and the chutzpah and whatever with you. And you make sure that that's a dynamic and diverse group by getting to know your people, and by getting to know their intersectional realities, so that you can match the right people with the right opportunities for success for your business, because it's your name. And this is part of how you can take yourself seriously, which is just to say, like, this work doesn't actually have to be that hard. Like your job as a leader of the company, maybe sometimes a little bit stressful, and you've got feelings about it because you're at the head, but by like appreciating how much resource exists on your team and reinvesting in understanding that on a regular basis so that your brain can like log that away as much as possible is the way that you're going to solve the problems that are coming down the pike. It's also the way that you make sure that the women on your team are heard and seen and respected and promoted and mentored, etc., equitably. It's just by getting to know them and understanding and appreciating, like, you know, if you can make an equitable workplace for the people who've got more challenges than anybody else, you can solve the best problems. Like, it's a one-to-one. So hopefully this primer is helpful to some of you. And yeah, I just really encourage you to start thinking about being more transparent about where you are with your team so that your team can trust that their leader is aware of what they're aware of and what they're not aware of too. Because the thing about blind spots is that it's way more dangerous for people to follow a leader who's blind to their blind spots than it is for people to follow a leader who's aware of their blind spots and working on playing around the edges of their blind spots so they can shift the blind spot, right? Like, we are most dangerous to each other when we're unaware of things. So as a leader, if you can just like help the women on your team appreciate, like, yo, we make all of our deals in the back office when you're never around. I'm really sorry. I'm going to make a commitment to changing that. Or, yo, I know that you're pregnant and you're feeling really vulnerable because the money and the reality of wanting to spend most of this next year or 2 years or how many ever years with your little kid and the importance of this work, and you're having a bunch of emotional stuff about it, and. I only want to give you a job that you love, that you want to focus on, that's going to help you work through all of the problems that you need to solve around preparing for this child. And I want to open a dialogue with you about what you need so that in the ways that I can give that to you. And we can create policies so that you're not the only one who gets the benefit, and the next person who comes around who has the needs that you do doesn't need to go through this process, right? Like, as the leader, you're not promising the world. You're just saying, let's have a conversation. Because people are reasonable, you know? And unless you're sacking millions of dollars a year and a super miser and not willing to like help people out, people are going to work with you. You know, and like the other thing is like, from your vantage point, from what you see in society, you can probably connect your people. You can probably connect the women who work for you with solutions that they can't quite see. So like, the solution is not always paying more money for more benefits or more wages. The solution is treating all of your staff with respect and being honest and transparent about where you are, so that they can follow you and they can give you everything they've got. Because the reality is, if you are a W-2, if you're working for somebody else, you just want to work. You don't want office politics or any kind of like unnecessary shit to be in your way. And so when women feel unheard or feel like the workplace is inequitable, which most workplaces are, that gets in the way. That's a psychological block from women participating more, because, you know, some of us like fucking fight through it. But most of the time, this is where you start to see quiet quitting. This is where you start to say, well, I'm just going to pull a paycheck because that's what I need to do to make ends meet. And from a decarbonization agenda standpoint, that's not acceptable. And it is acceptable if that's the reality of the situation and the leadership sucks. I'm trying to say leadership doesn't have to suck. Leadership can't suck. Leadership has to be awesome. So like, let's just do that. Let's just make leadership awesome so that our staff can work for us in any capacity and in all the capacities with all of their needs. None of it scares us. We're going to solve the problem together. I'm trying to say the cheapest, fastest, easiest solution to all of this stuff is up-leveling our leadership. And it's about vulnerability and transparency and honoring the fact that we're humans and we're imperfect, but we're trying. So hopefully some of this was supportive to you, and I look forward to keeping the dialogue going. Please be in touch with me if you want to talk about this type of work and this type of support for your team. I'm really happy to do consulting with different decarbonization founders and executives and senior leaders to think about what their team might need, given the constraints and the resources available, and how to meet those needs so that the team is empowered to kick ass, like to just like solve the biggest problems in the world, and be real leaders as teams together, right? Like the model for leadership in the future is not about one person, it's about groups of people demonstrating incredible leadership to each other. And that's what the decarbonization agenda can do, is develop companies and ecosystems of such intense leadership that the future is, we're excited to go there. We're excited about the future. All right. Bon voyage. See you soon.